Imagine for a second, you're standing in a very specific zone within a country.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Like physically, you are standing on the soil of that nation. You breathe the same air. You see the same sky. The gravity is, the exact same.
Right, obviously.
But economically, you might as well be on Mars.
That is
Or at least in a completely different country.
Yeah, it's a fascinating mental image, isn't it?
Really?
It sounds a bit like science fiction, but it's actually just, well, economic policy.
It really is. So Sanjeev Verma, in his text on the Indian economy, he uses this really vivid analogy that I just can't shake.
Oh, the prison analogy.
Yes. He describes the zone as a prison, but, not a prison of punishment, a prison of profit.
Right.
A prison insulated from the outside world, but instead of bars, you have tax breaks. And instead of guards, you have high-speed infrastructure. You are in a special economic zone, or an SEZ.
That is a very dramatic, but honestly surprisingly accurate way to describe the legal fiction that powers these zones.
Legal fiction, yeah.
Because they are physically in India, but fiscally, and for the purposes of trade operations, duties, tariffs, they are deemed foreign territory.
Deemed foreign territory, which is wild.
It is. It's a bubble where the normal rules of the domestic economy simply don't apply to you.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are laser focused on the full summary for UPSC, presented by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
It's a crucial topic, really, for anyone trying to understand the structural transformation of the Indian economy.
Absolutely.
Especially for those of you navigating the massive syllabus of the UPSC exams. You have to understand this stuff.
You do. And before we jump into this economic prison of profit, I have a very specific mission-critical request for you.
Where'd you go?
To really retain this information and to make sure you don't miss the next breakdown, you need to subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
It really helps.
It helps you, and it helps the algorithm find other learners like you who are, struggling with these heavy concepts.
And if you are capable, there is a humble request to support the channel on Patreon.
Yes, please.
Because creating this level of detailed, super useful content, digging through Sanjeev Verma, cross-referencing Vivek Singh, it takes real resources.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time.
Your support keeps the lights on and the high-quality content coming, so thank you.
A massive shout out to all the current supporters. You guys are the real MVPs making this possible. Also, engage with us. Like the video, share a valuable comment. Let us know what you think.
And for the serious learners, listen up. Free notes with practice previous year questions, or PYQs, are available right now on the public Telegram channel.
Free notes are always good.
But for those who want the ultimate edge, there's a private Telegram library.
Oh yeah, the premium stuff.
Exactly. That gives you access to all the videos in this series at once, plus organized premium notes. We're talking detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers that are ready to write.
You just need to DM on the public Telegram channel to join that private library.
Highly recommend it.
Okay, housekeeping done. Let's get to the mission. Today, we are decoding Chapter 22 of Sanjeev Verma's Indian Economy.
The chapter titled Export-Led Growth Strategy, SEZs.
Right, but we aren't stopping there. To make sure this concept is crystal clear, we are layering in insights from Vivek Singh's Indian economy as well. We're keeping it impartial, just reporting what the sources say, but we want the full picture.
We have a lot of ground to cover. We need to look at the philosophy of why nations export, the nuts and bolts of the SEZ Act.
The clash of titans.
Yes, the clash of titans between the India and China models, which is fascinating. And the future of these zones with the Kalyani Committee report.
So let's start with the big shift. Section 1, I guess we can call it, the strategy shift. To understand why we even have these zones, we have to go back in time a bit, pre-1991.
Right. If you look at India before the 1991 reforms, we were the textbook definition of an inward-looking economy. The economic term is import substitution.
Which basically means why buy it from them when we can make it ourselves?
Exactly. Even if making it ourselves costs twice as much, creates a lower quality product, and takes 3 times as long.
The philosophy was self-reliance at any cost.
At any cost. The economy was like a house with all the windows and doors bolted shut. We were entirely insulated.
But then came 1991, and we finally opened the windows.
We did. Globalization is essentially the process of opening those windows. It's about lowering that insulation and increasing the share of trade in your GDP.
Okay.
Now, Sanjeev Verma makes a very important distinction here that we really need to unpack. He separates export-led growth from growth-led exports.
Okay, let's unpack this because to the layman, those sound like the exact same three words just shuffled around. Is there really a difference?
The difference is massive. It's the difference between the engine pulling the train and the caboose following the train. Let's look at export-led growth first.
All right.
This was the secret sauce of the Asian tigers. South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, Thailand.
The miracle economies of the late 20th century.
Correct.
Yeah.
But remember, these were relatively small economies. They didn't have a huge domestic population with a ton of money to spend.
Right, they couldn't just sell to themselves.
Exactly. They couldn't get rich just by selling stuff to their own neighbors. So they decided that the engine of their GDP would be external demand.
Meaning?
They manufactured specifically for the U.S. and Europe.
So they hitched their wagon to the Western consumer. If the American consumer wanted a toaster, Korea would make the best, cheapest toaster possible.
Precisely. Sanjeev Verma calls them butterfly economies.
Butterfly economies. That's a delicate image. Why butterflies?
Because a butterfly is beautiful and moves fast, but it's fragile.
Ah.
These economies soared when global demand was high. They grew incredibly fast in a short time frame. But do you remember the late 90s? The Asian currency crisis?
Vaguely. That was a total bloodbath for those currencies.
It was, and it exposed the fatal flaw in the butterfly model. Because they relied so heavily on exports when global demand sneezed, these economies caught pneumonia.
They were too exposed.
Right, they had no domestic cushion to fall back on.
Okay, so that's the butterfly model, export-led growth.
Yeah.
What is the alternative then? Growth-led exports.
This is what we can call the tortoise model. It's slower, but perhaps a lot more robust.
Okay.
In this model, you focus on your domestic manufacturing sector first. You build factories to sell to your own people.
So you look inward first.
Yes. You let those industries mature, become efficient, learn the ropes, and then once they are strong enough to compete, they start looking for markets abroad.
So in this case, exports are a consequence of your internal growth, not the primary cause of it.
Exactly. You grow first, then you export.
So where does India fit into all this? I mean, we have 1 billion people, so we can't really be a butterfly, right? We have too many mouths to feed and too many people to buy things.
We are definitely too big to be a butterfly.
Yeah.
But we didn't just want to be the tortoise either.
So what did we do?
India, and actually China, to a large extent, adopted a hybrid approach. It's a mix.
The best of both worlds.
In theory, yes. We have a massive domestic market, so the broader economy followed the growth-led strategy. We make cars for Indians, clothes for Indians.
Right.
But the government realized we still needed foreign currency. We needed dollars to buy oil and technology.
Because the domestic market doesn't pay in dollars.
Exactly. So they carved out these specific geographies, the special economic zones, to act as little laboratories for export-led growth.
So the SEZ is like a little slice of the Asian tiger model implanted right into the Indian landscape.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Inside the fence, the focus is entirely on the global market. Inside the zone, we are basically pretending to be South Korea.
And outside.
Outside the fence, in what's called the domestic tariff area, or DTA, the focus is on the Indian consumer.
The domestic tariff area, DTA. I'll remember that. So the goal was to shift India from exporting just our surplus leftovers to actually manufacturing specifically for global tastes.
Right. Traditionally, India only exported what we couldn't consume ourselves. The SEZ was supposed to change that mindset to, let's make this specifically for the world from day one.
Let's move to Section 2, the evolution of SEZs. I was actually surprised reading the notes to find that India wasn't late to this party. We weren't just copying China after the fact. We were early.
Very early. In fact, India was a pioneer in this space. We set up the Kandla Free Trade Zone way back in 1965.
In 1965. That's before China even opened up its economy. That's before the Asian tigers really roared.
Decades before. Kandla was Asia's first export processing zone, or EPZ. So we actually had the first mover advantage.
But clearly we didn't become the factory of the world in the 70s and 80s. What happened?
Well, being first isn't always the same as being best. We started with EPZs, but you have to understand the difference between an EPZ export processing zone and an SEZ special economic zone.
Is it not just a rebrand, a name change?
Oh, not at all. It's a fundamental shift. An EPZ is usually just a fenced-off industrial estate. It's literally a place to process goods. It's supplementary to the rest of the economy. It doesn't have a life of its own. It was strictly industrial, often with terrible connectivity. Just a place to put machines.
And an SEZ, what makes it special?
The SEZ Act of 2005 envisioned something much grander. An SEZ is supposed to be an integrated township.
A township.
Right. It's not just a factory, it's a city. It has residential complexes for the workers, schools for their kids, hospitals, malls, recreation centers.
So the idea was to create these utopian bubbles where infrastructure actually worked.
Precisely. In the rest of India, especially back in the early 2000s, power cuts and bad roads were just the norm.
Yeah, standard operating procedure.
But in the SEZ, you were promised 247 power, wide roads, and clean water. That was the pitch. You live there, you work there, you export from there.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of it, the carrot that draws people in. You defined it earlier as a deemed foreign territory. What does that mean practically?
Okay, let's use an example.
Yeah, let's say I'm a business owner. I run a steel factory in Delhi, which is in the domestic tariff area, the DTA, right?
Right.
And I send a truckload of steel to an SEZ in Noida.
Legally speaking, you just exported that steel.
Even though the truck literally drove 20 kilometers and the driver stopped for chai at a local dhaba on the way.
Doesn't matter at all. As soon as it crosses that SEZ gate, it has left India for fiscal purposes.
Wow.
You, the Delhi seller, can claim export benefits. You aren't paying domestic taxes on that sale.
And what if the SEZ factory makes a finished car out of that steel and tries to sell it back to me in Delhi?
That is an import. You, as the buyer in Delhi, have to pay customs duty on that car, just as if you bought it from Japan or Germany.
That creates a very hard border. It really is a separate country economically.
It is.
But surely the government doesn't just let anyone set up shop there to avoid taxes. There must be a catch. Otherwise, everyone would move there.
There's a catch. It's the NFE rule, net foreign exchange earner. This is the absolute golden rule of the SEZ.
NFE, how does that work?
It's a check and balance. The government basically says, look, we will give you tax breaks and cheap land, but you cannot be a drain on our economy.
Fair enough.
So over a block of 5 years, your unit must earn more foreign exchange dollars, euros, whatever, through exports than the foreign exchange you spend on importing raw materials.
So you have to be net positive. You can't just consume dollars to build your product. You have to generate more dollars than you use.
Correct. You have to be a net plus for the country's Forex reserves. If you fail the NFE test over that 5-year block, you face heavy penalties, and you can lose your SEZ status entirely.
Okay, so that's the shtick. What are the carrots? Why would a businessman go through the hassle of moving his whole operation to this foreign territory? I read the incentives in the 2005 Act were famously generous.
They were incredibly generous. The biggest one, by far, was the income tax holiday.
Holiday sounds nice. Everyone likes a holiday.
It was better than nice. For the first 5 years, you paid 0% income tax on your export profits. Zero.
Zero. That is huge. That's pure profit retention.
Then for the next 5 years, you paid only 50% tax.
Okay.
And for 5 years after that, you could still get a 50% deduction if you reinvested those profits back into the business.
So it was essentially a 15-year tax shelter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Designed to encourage long-term, massive investment.
And I assume the red tape was less. That's usually the other major complaint about doing business in India.
Theoretically, yes. They promised single window clearance.
Single window.
The idea was that you wouldn't have to run between the State Pollution Board, the Central Labor Department, and the local municipal corporation. One window, one approval, done.
Theoretically is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, I feel like. But we'll get to the controversies in a moment.
We will.
One more technical point Vivek Singh mentions regarding GST. I think this is important because GST came much later than the 2005 SEZ Act.
Yes, this is very important for current context.
Okay.
Supplies from the domestic tariff area, the DTA, to an SEZ are considered zero-rated under GST.
Does that just mean exempt? Like you don't pay tax?
No, and the distinction matters a lot, especially for the exams. Exempt means no tax is charged on the final sale, but you also can't claim credit for taxes you paid on your raw materials. It breaks the input credit chain.
Right, so the cost is still kind of baked in.
Exactly. But zero-rated means the tax on the final sale is zero, and you can claim a refund on all the input taxes you paid along the way.
Oh, wow.
It's the highest level of tax benefit possible under the GST regime.
Okay, so on paper, this looks like an absolute slam dunk. We built the cities, we gave the 15-year tax breaks, we cut the red tape. But this brings us to Section 3, the clash of titans. We tried to do what China did, but when we look at the data, the results are not the same.
They aren't even close. Sanjeev Verma provides a comparison table in the text that is, honestly, a bit depressing if you're an Indian policy planner.
Let's hear it.
The differences are entirely structural.
Let's look at size first. To me, this is the most shocking stat.
It's the defining difference. Look at China's Shenzhen SEZ. It is over 49,000 hectares.
49,000.
It's a metropolis. It encompasses entire districts. It has a population of millions.
In India, what's our size?
In India, the minimum size for a multi-product SEZ is just 500 hectares.
500 versus 49,000. That's not a difference in scale. That's a difference in species. It's like comparing a house cat to a T-Rex.
That's a good way to put it. In China, the SEZ is a region. In India, the SEZ is just a project.
Right.
Because our zones are so small, they can't achieve the economies of scale that China did. You can't fit a whole supply chain from raw material to finished iPhone inside 500 hectares.
That makes sense.
In China, the component maker is right next door to the assembler. In India, they might be 3 states away.
What about location? Because China was very specific about where they put these giant zones, right?
Yes, China followed a strict coastal strategy. They placed their SEZs right on the ports. Shenzhen, Shantou, Zhuhai.
Which minimizes logistics costs.
Exactly. You make the toy, you put it on the ship, it's gone. Frictionless.
And India. Where did we put ours?
We largely let politics dictate the location. We have SEZs in landlocked states like Haryana, Punjab, and Telangana.
I mean, Haryana is a great industrial state, but it's, what, 1,000 kilometers from the nearest ocean?
Which means you have to put your finished goods on a train or a truck, drive them across the country to a port in Mumbai or Gujarat, and then you can export them.
You've added massive cost and time before the product even leaves the country.
It completely defeats the purpose of frictionless trade.
But the biggest philosophical difference seems to be about who actually builds these things. The driver behind it all.
Right, the driver. In China, it was entirely state-driven. The Communist Party looked at a map and said, we are building a massive city right here.
And they just did it.
They acquired the land, they poured the concrete, they built the power plants. The government owned the zone.
And in India, it's private sector driven.
Yes, and this is where we really have to talk about democratic capitalism. In India, the government simply cannot wake up and say, we are taking 50,000 hectares of land today.
The protests would be unimaginable.
We have strict property rights, we have a very dense population, and we have a vibrant democracy. Land acquisition is arguably the single hardest thing to do in India.
We saw what happened in places like Singer and Nandigram. Governments literally fall over land issues.
Yeah, exactly. So the government outsourced it. They told private developers, companies like Reliance, Adani, DLF, you buy the land, you build the infrastructure, and we will give you the tax breaks.
And this leads directly into the controversies in Section 4, because when you ask a private developer to build an export zone, their motivation might not align perfectly with the nation's export goals.
This is the famous real estate criticism. A private developer is looking for return on investment, ROI.
Naturally.
What pays better and faster? Building a complex, heavy manufacturing factory that might take 10 years to break even. Or building luxury condos and IT office space that you can lease out tomorrow.
The condos, obviously. Real estate in India is gold.
So the accusation, and it's a very strong one, backed by a lot of data, is that many SEZs just became land grabs. Developers bought land cheap using the SEZ tag, got the tax breaks, and then focused heavily on the real estate aspect rather than building world-class export infrastructure.
The SEZ basically became a legal loophole for property development.
In many cases, yes.
Wow. And then there's the phrase tax terrorism. That's a very heavy term. It sounds like something out of a crime thriller, but it's about fiscal policy here. What happened there?
It refers to the government essentially breaking its promises. Remember that 100% tax holiday we talked about?
The 15-year shelter.
Yeah.
The big carrot.
Well, a few years into the program, the finance ministry looked at the books and said, wait a minute, we're losing way too much money. Sanjeev Verma cites a figure of over rupees 1,000 crores in revenue foregone.
100,000 crores. That's a lot of schools and hospitals that didn't get funded.
That was exactly the argument. So in 2011, the government introduced MAT, minimum alternate tax. They slapped it on SEZ developers and units.
So they basically said, hey, just kidding about that zero tax thing we promised you.
Essentially, yes. They pulled the rug right out from under the investors. Vivek Singh explicitly calls this a flip-flop policy.
And if there is one thing investors hate more than high taxes, it's unpredictable taxes.
Exactly. It shattered confidence. Foreign investors looked at India and said, your sovereign promises come with an asterisk. It completely stalled the momentum of the entire SEZ movement.
Because if you can change the rules halfway through the game, why should I invest billions of dollars?
Exactly. You wouldn't.
We also have to touch on the land issue again. We talked about it briefly with the protests, but there is this underlying fear that we are using fertile agricultural land for factories.
It is a very valid emotional concern, especially given our history with food security. But if you look at the actual data, and data is important here, SEZs occupy something like 0.015% of the total land area of India.
Wait, 0.015%, that is tiny.
It's negligible in the grand scheme of things. But because land is so hyper-political in India, every single acre acquired becomes a battleground.
The perception was what mattered.
Right. The perception was that farmers were being displaced purely for corporate profit.
What about regional imbalance? You mentioned China put them all on the coast. In India, are they evenly spread across the states? Did the private sector drive lead to balanced growth?
Not at all. Private capital flows where infrastructure already exists. It takes the path of least resistance.
Makes sense.
The data shows a massive concentration. About 44% of SEZs are in the south, and 29% are in the west.
So that's over 70% in just 2 regions. So if you are in Bihar, UP, or the Northeast.
You are largely watching the show from the sidelines. The SEZs gravitated towards states that were already industrialized, which ended up widening the gap between the rich states and the poor states.
It exacerbated regional inequality rather than solving it.
Exactly.
And the CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General, they put the final nail in the coffin, didn't they?
They did. The CAG report was scathing. They pointed out that vast tracts of land acquired for SEZs were just lying unutilized, just fenced off and completely empty.
Just sitting there.
The employment generation was nowhere near the targets. And outside of the IT sector, the manufacturing boost was just negligible.
That's a grim report card. But you mentioned outside the IT sector. That suggests there was at least one bright spot. Let's move to Section 5, beyond manufacturing.
Yes. We can't paint it all black. The tech parks were a roaring success.
STPI,
Yeah.
Software Technology Parks of India, and EHTP, Electronic Hardware Technology Parks.
These are essentially miniature SEZs, but specifically tailored just for software and electronics. And they worked because they played perfectly to India's strengths.
How so?
You don't need 500 hectares for an IT park. You need a building, good air conditioning, and a high-speed satellite link.
And you definitely don't need a 4-lane highway to export code to America.
Exactly. The virtual nature of the export completely bypassed India's crumbling physical infrastructure. STPIs are the reason Bangalore and Hyderabad became global brands.
They really are.
They're the major driver of our services export boom. And because their footprint was so small, they didn't face those massive land acquisition hurdles.
But we also tried this localized approach with agriculture, didn't we? AEZs, agri-export zones.
We did try. The idea was the cluster approach. Identify a region, say Nagpur for oranges, or Kashmir for apples, or Maharashtra for mangoes, and declare it an AEZ.
Okay.
Then provide end-to-end support to get those oranges all the way to a supermarket in London or Tokyo.
Why didn't that take off like the IT parks? I mean, India is an agricultural powerhouse.
2 words: complexity and federalism. Agriculture is a state subject in India. The center in Delhi can declare an AEZ on paper, but the state government has to do the actual heavy lifting.
Building the roads, providing the power, interacting with the local farmers.
Yes. And if the state government is lazy or, frankly, broke,
Nothing happens.
nothing happens.
Yeah.
Plus, the supply chain was broken. To export fruit, you need cold storage, processing units, and quality control that meets very strict European standards.
And that infrastructure just wasn't built.
It wasn't. The farmer was still selling to the local mandi because the export link never materialized. There was no real R&D, no modernization. It remained a very good idea on paper.
And quickly explain EOUs, export-oriented units.
This is for the lonely wolf. Let's say you have a factory that simply can't relocate to a specific zone. Maybe you are tied to a raw material source deep in the interior of the country.
Like a mine or something.
Right. You can apply for EOU status. You get SEZ-like benefits without being inside the physical zone as long as you are a net foreign exchange earner. It offers flexibility for units that can't move.
Okay, so to summarize where we are, we have a mixed bag. Manufacturing SEZs really struggled due to land and tax issues. IT parks absolutely boomed. Agri-zones totally stagnated.
That's the landscape.
Now, the
Right.
government obviously knows this. They know the SEZ Act of 2005 is well past its sell-by date. Enter Section 6, the Way Forward, and the Baba Kalyani Committee.
This is the major pivot point. The government brought in Baba Kalyani, who is the chairman of Farhad Forge, a real manufacturing legend in India, to fix the policy. His report is the blueprint for the future.
What was his core philosophy? How do we fix this?
He said we need to move away from just looking at exports to focusing on the 3 E's.
The 3 E's, another acronym. Break it down for us.
Employment, economic growth, and economic enclaves.
Okay, it sounds like nice buzzwords, but what does it mean practically on the ground?
It's a complete shift in mindset. The old SEZ model was obsessed with foreign exchange. The only question was, how many dollars did you bring in?
Right, the NFE rule.
Baba Kalyani said, stop counting dollars and start counting jobs. Even if a zone doesn't export 100% of its goods, if it's creating tens of thousands of jobs and generating massive domestic economic activity, it is a success.
So his idea is to reintegrate these zones back into the domestic economy.
Yes. Stop isolating them. He also recommended separating manufacturing and service SEZs because their needs are entirely different. You can't regulate a massive steel plant and a software office with the exact same rulebook.
That makes a lot of sense. He also pushed for infrastructure status for SEZs, right?
Yes, and that's huge.
What does infrastructure status actually do?
It unlocks the banks. If you have infrastructure status, you get priority lending, much lower interest rates, and longer repayment terms. It makes financing these massive, multi-decade projects viable.
He also talked about dispute resolution, which is always a nightmare here.
Crucial point. In India, if a commercial contract goes bad, you are stuck in court for 20 years. Baba Kalyani said we need dedicated commercial courts specifically for these zones, fast-track justice.
Because if you want foreign investors, you can't hold their money hostage in the legal system.
Exactly. Time is money.
And all of this culminates in the new legislation we keep hearing about in the budget, the DESH Bill.
The Development of Enterprise and Service Hubs Bill. Vivek Singh highlights this as the eventual replacement for the old SEZ Act.
Is this just a rebrand, like old wine in a new bottle? Or is it a real structural fix?
It tries to solve the fundamental flaws we just discussed. First, it brings the states into the partnership. It actively incentivizes states to be active participants rather than passive bystanders.
Okay.
Second, and most importantly, it allows for partial denotification.
What does partial denotification mean?
Right now, an SEZ is all or nothing. You are either fully in the export game or you're out. Under DEH, the goal is to utilize all that unutilized land the CAG complained about.
Oh.
If a factory inside the zone isn't exporting successfully, maybe let them sell domestically to the DTA without paying crazy, punitive penalties. Turn the empty economic zones into actual development hubs.
So it's about flexibility, kind of tearing down the prison walls a little bit.
Exactly. Integrating these islands back into the mainland. It's admitting that the strict separation of 2005 just didn't work for India.
Now, for our listeners who are actually grinding for the exams, let's look at Section 7, Previous Year Questions Linkage. How does UPSC actually test this knowledge?
Well, they don't ask simple trivia questions like, when was the SEZ Act passed? They ask deep analytical questions. Look at the 2015 Mains GS3 paper.
What was the specific question?
The question was, there is a clear acknowledgement that SEZs are a tool of industrial development. Discuss the issues plaguing the success of SEZs with respect to taxation, governing laws, and administration.
Wow. That is literally the outline of our deep dive today.
It really is. If you paid attention to the tax terrorism section, you have your exact answer for taxation. EMIT, inconsistent policy, broken promises.
Yep.
If you listen to the democratic capitalism section, you have the answer for governing laws,
Right.
the clash between the Land Acquisition Act and the SEZ Act.
Right.
And if you listen to the single window section, you have the answer for administration. You simply have to connect the dots we just discussed.
It's all right there. And what about for prelims?
In 2020, there was a question about public investment in agriculture. That links directly to why the AEZs failed the absolute lack of public investment in cold chains and logistics.
It's all connected.
It is. And generally, any question on ease of doing business or the Make in India initiative ultimately links back to the efficacy of these zones. When you study SEZs, don't just memorize the Act provisions.
Understand the why.
Yes. Why did manufacturing fail? Why did IT succeed? That conceptual clarity is where the marks are.
Before we wrap up Section 8, we need to touch on some additional high-value concepts from Vivek Singh's book. These represent the new generation of zones.
Yes, we absolutely can't leave without talking about Gift City.
Gujarat International Finance Tech City. Is this an SEZ?
It's an SEZ on steroids. It is India's first IFSC International Financial Services Center.
What is the point of an IFSC?
Think about it this way. Indian companies buy billions of dollars of financial services hedging, complex insurance, international arbitration from places like Dubai, Singapore, and London.
We are essentially exporting our financial demand.
Precisely. Gift to City is an attempt to bring all that lucrative business back to India.
But how? The Indian rupee isn't fully convertible. You can't just do global finance in rupees easily.
By creating a zone that operates entirely in foreign currency. Inside the Gift City SEZ, you can transact in dollars or euros seamlessly.
Oh, wow.
It's like a little slice of London dropped right into Gati. It allows Indian firms to access global finance without ever leaving Indian soil. It is attempting to onshore the offshore financial market.
That is a massive game changer if it works. And what about the industrial corridors? Like DMIC?
Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. This is the next evolution of the SEZ concept. Instead of a spot on the map, it's a line.
Like a belt.
A 1,500-kilometer belt. The idea is to build a high-speed freight railway. The dedicated freight corridor is the backbone. And then, every 100 kilometers or so along that track, you build a smart industrial city.
So you integrate the logistics right into the factory location from day one.
Exactly. It completely solves the location problem we talked about earlier.
Yep.
You aren't building a factory in the middle of nowhere and hoping a road gets built. You are building it directly on a high-speed rail line.
And finally, the glue that holds all of this physical movement together. PM Gati Shakti and MMLPs.
Multimodal logistics parks. This is solving the absolute biggest headache of Indian manufacturing. Logistics cost.
What are the numbers on that? How bad is it?
In developed countries, logistics cost is about 8% of their GDP. In India, it's hovering around 13 to 14%.
That 5% spread is your entire profit margin right there.
It makes our goods completely uncompetitive globally. If it costs more to ship a shirt from Ludhiana to Mumbai than it does to ship it from Shanghai all the way to New York, we lose.
Yeah, we can't compete with that.
So MMLPs aim to bring rail, road, and port connectivity into single, massive hubs to smash those costs down. It's about seamlessly moving goods from a truck to a train to a ship without endless paperwork delays.
So bringing it all together for the outro, we've traveled quite a distance today.
We really have. We started in the closed, insulated house of pre-1991. We watched India try to copy the Asian tigers by building these prisons of profit, the SEZs.
We saw how the reality of Indian democracy and messy land politics forced us to create smaller, private-led zones that just couldn't quite match the scale of China.
We saw the policy flip-flops, the tax terrorism, and the resulting stagnation in manufacturing, even as our IT sector absolutely boomed in its own little tailored zones.
And now, with the Kalyani report and the DESH Bill, we are seeing a shift in philosophy from just earning dollars to creating broad-based growth.
It's a maturing of the model, I think. We're finally realizing that you can't just build an island of excellence in a sea of inefficiency. You have to lift the whole sea.
Here's my final provocative thought for you to chew on. We started by calling SEZs a foreign territory.
Right.
If the new DAS bill passes and we integrate these hubs back into the domestic market, does the concept of a special economic zone basically die? Or is the ultimate goal of an SEZ to make the entire country so efficient that we don't need special zones anymore? Is the success of an SEZ measured by how quickly it makes itself obsolete?
That is a profound question. Ideally, the whole of India should be an SEZ. The whole country should have great infrastructure and simple taxes. But until then, we have these hubs.
Something to mull over as you study. If you found this breakdown useful, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP. It really helps the channel grow and reach more learners.
And again, a humble request to support on Patreon if you are capable. It keeps the research team going and allows us to produce this high-density content for you.
Massive thanks to all the supporters. Don't forget to join the Telegram channel for the free notes and PYQs we discussed today.
And if you want the premium organized notes, the full library of videos, and the model mains answers, just DM on the public Telegram channel to get access to the private library.
Keep learning, keep questioning.
See you in the next deep dive.